Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com. Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. Ray Flowers breaks it all down for you from a fantasy sports perspective. Hey everyone, Ray Flowers of FantasyGuru.com. Thanks for joining me today. It is Friday and week 7. I don't even know what day it is. It's the 18th of October. I had to look down at my calendar. Halloween is coming. Yay. Do you celebrate Halloween? If you know me, you know I do. I wonder if you do. I don't get dressed up and trick or treat. Let's not get crazy. But yeah, I do celebrate Halloween. Do you? Let me know in the chat room if you want. When I say chat room, for those of you that are watching live on YouTube at youtube.com/@ElitePlusNetwork or on Facebook.com/FantasyGuruHQ, you can leave comments and questions throughout the show and we will address those. You can always watch those streams live after the fact as well. We're live on Twitter X at Fantasy Guru site if you want to watch there. We're also available if you go to FantasyGuru.com, click the Elite Plus tab at the top of the page. You can find this show cataloged. And you can also type in Fantasy Sports Daily to your podcast network. That will also get you the access to all the previous shows. So you can take it with you on the go. You can take us to the gym. You can take us in the car. You can watch us live. You can watch us on tape delay. No one says that anymore because I'm old, because a lot of you that are younger don't even know what tape delay means. But you know what I'm saying. You can watch it after the fact. I'm Ray Flowers of FantasyGuru.com. You can find me at FG. You can find me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But you can hear this show all throughout the week. Justin Fensterman hosts on Wednesdays. Fantasy Sports Daily, 12 o'clock Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. We break it all down from a fantasy sports perspective. You heard it in the intro. So we have a lot of fun here on the show. We do a lot of things here on the show. And today we're going to do some big things on the show. We're going to have a couple of guests. We don't do this very often. We're getting hot today on a Friday. First off, I'll break down real quickly here some Thursday night football thoughts. Then we'll welcome in Scott Bondar, who you know and well, if you know from FantasyGuru.com. If you don't, you should. He does really good work. He's one of the main guys with our college football. And you know I know nothing about college football. So we're bringing in Scott to talk about the slate both today and tomorrow, to give some pointers there, because I'd be useless if I was trying to help you there. We'll then talk to him for about 20 or so minutes, and we'll visit with Russell Clay, who's going to join us to talk a little bit about what he saw on Thursday Night Football, kind of looking at what some expectations are for some young players like Drake Maye, Issac Guerrendo. What are the Cardinals doing through the air? What about streaming the tight end? Why does everyone hate Evan Engram? And what about Shakir versus Juju? So we'll talk to Russell about that. And in a couple of minutes, again, we'll visit a couple of minutes here, 3, 4, 5 minutes. We'll visit with Scott Bondar. Just some quick thoughts on Thursday night football. Game went as predicted. The Broncos won the football game, and the Saints are in massive trouble. Spencer Rattler ain't it, and maybe at some point he will be. Sorry, I think I had something in my mouth there. Maybe at some point he will be. But the fact is, right now, in terms of where he's at in his development, he's just not ready. Jake Haener came in, and the offense worked. Now, again, it's late. Game was out of reach. Broncos, okay. But the offense looked better just in that limited time. And now if Derek Carr can't go next game for the Saints, very legitimate question to ask if Haener's going to be the starter over Rattler. Rattler had a pick six that was a fumble six. He fumbled a couple times. The offense didn't work. They got boat raced by the Broncos. The Broncos didn't do anything. Bo Nix threw for 164 yards and no touchdowns. But they ran the ball effectively. Javonte Williams finally showed up. So everyone is plugging in Javonte Williams every week. You finally got your payoff there. He scored a couple of times, had 17 touches, over 100 yards from scrimmage. Bo Nix himself ran for 75 yards, and he's been bringing that aspect of things. We talked about that earlier this week. The fact that Bo Nix has been using his legs enough to the point where, in certain respects, he might be a streaming option. Obviously he played last night, so if you're looking ahead to week 8, all 32 teams are playing in week 8. There's no buys, so he's not a streaming option next week, but maybe down the stretch he'll be. Troy Franklin apparently is the guy to get. He's got 5 catches for 50 yards last night. He leads the team in targets and receptions the last 2 games. Stupefied am I. Straight stupefied. That Courtland Sutton plays a game out there on the field. Let's look at the snap count. Courtland Sutton, in terms of players at the wide receiver position for the Broncos, led them in snaps. He almost doubled everyone else. Franklin played 33 snaps. Sutton played 56. So a massive difference there. He led the team in snaps. He led the team in routes. The only player that had more snaps was Bo Nix. Okay? 0 targets. How is that possible? I know you won the football game 33-10. I know you threw it 26 times. I know you didn't need to push things. I get all of that. But Courtland Sutton, 0 snaps. Like, we can all be excited about, Javonte Williams and, Troy Franklin emerging a little bit here. But really, Broncos? 0 targets to Cortland Sutton? I think we had him ranked 41st or something. So he's a wide receiver 4 this week, and he's basically a wide receiver 4 most weeks. But wow, just awful. Just freaking awful. Going back to the other side at the wide receiver position, this is Chris Olave was out. He's likely to return for the next game from his head injury. We'll see. We got the news with Rashid Shaheed. He is done for the year. So this motley crew of receivers catching passes from a motley quarterback, whether it's Rattler or Haener, because I don't think it's going to be Carr. Maybe Carr will give it a go because their season, the Saints, is circling the toilet already. Maybe, but Bub Means led the group in routes and snaps last night. But it was Tipton who led the group in production. Tipton had 6 catches for 45 yards. He saw 9 targets. Bub Means had 5 targets, 3 catches for 37 yards. The most productive fantasy play was the guy that no one is really talking about, the veteran Cedric Wilson. 6 catches, 57 yards, and a score. Note that his score came late. Note that it was from Haener and not Rattler. If you look at the snap counts there, those 3 guys, Means, Tipton, and Wilson, basically played the majority of the game, though the Saints ran a ton of 2 tight end sets. And if that's the way they're going to operate, and it probably is, maybe it changed a little bit with Chris Olave back. But if they're going to run 2 tight end sets, it's bad. Any team that takes their quarterback out, especially when you then talk about going to rookies and guys that have no experience, it's going to be tough. When you talk about that team also losing their wide receiver 1 and 2, it's hopeless, right? So as Jeff Mans was talking about yesterday on the Elite Sports Show, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern time on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, he didn't understand why the spread was so low, why the Broncos weren't favored by much more. Maybe you took advantage of that advice and you put a couple of bucks down on the Broncos, who moved to 4-3. Saints fall to 2-5, 33-10. Broncos over Saints. We'll talk a little bit more about this game, focusing especially on the backfield with Kendre Miller and Audric Estime and their potential moving forward with Russell Clay in about 20 minutes. Okay, before we get to that, though, we're going to talk some college football. And as I said today, as I've said previously, I ain't know nothing about college football. But Ray, you do pro? Yeah, I do NFL, but I honestly don't learn anything about these guys until April when the draft happens. So I am of no use at all whatsoever in helping anybody out with anything college football. We do have a crew of folks over at fantasyguru.com. Remember, click that subscribe tab in the top right corner of the page. We have a crew of people over there that do great work with college football. We talked to Chris Rose a couple of weeks ago. Today, we're going to talk to Scott Bondar. So let's bring Scott in, and we'll have a little discussion with Scott about what's going on in college football this week. Scott Bondar of fantasyguru.com. Scott, how you doing today?
Hey, what's going on, Ray? How are you been?
I've been pretty good. It's been a while since we talked. You're kind of a man of a jack of all trades, if you will. This sport, that sport. We got you going a little bit here and there. How have things gone thus far with college football?
It's been good. We're about 8 weeks into this. We've had some success from a couple of subs. I think one of the subs hit a couple 6 figures a couple weeks ago. We have multiple slates. We were talking last night. We have football until Thanksgiving. I mean, every day. I mean, I know Mike has been in the Discord kind of posting for the last couple slates. Right. Max action starts next week. Obviously tonight we got 4 games, throughout all the big conferences. I mean, you got, the Big 10 playing, we got, the Big 12, SEC, all these teams are going to be playing. So you have, a lot of unique matchups. The one thing I wanted to go before we get started, what about these MLB playoffs, man? I don't have any dog in a fight,
right?
But I've almost enjoyed every single game. I mean, it's been amazing. It's one of the best I've seen in years.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that you always have the intrigue, right? You have Clase blowing a game, which he never did all season long. You've got teams doing weird things. Kodai Senga, who doesn't even pitch all year because he's injured, all of a sudden used in the playoffs. Gavin Williams, 3 weeks, 4 weeks between starts? Like, it's really interesting. It is fascinating to see who rises and who falls. To me, it's interesting, Scott, because so much of what happens now, Freddie Freeman's hurt, right? So much of what happens now is really about the collection of talent you have. The team that was winning games in August is not necessarily the team that you're throwing out there in the playoffs. It's really kind of different.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that, when especially writing up stuff for baseball. I mean, the David Fry, I liked him, but he didn't play. So, you kind of get, you get these matchups, but you kind of want to throw a guy like that because he's been pinch hitting, and it's been fun. I've watched more this year than I've probably watched in a while, just because it's been that entertaining. So, but more importantly, I know we came in here for college football. I know you're a big baseball guy.
Yeah, of course.
I was hoping that you would be, on the same page as me, and clearly you are. It's exciting.
Yeah, and as Scott noted, we're still covering it for baseball DFS. So again, if you want to get everything we do, you can always send a note to support@fantasyguru.com. Support@fantasyguru.com. Say, hey, I'd love to get the playoff baseball the rest of the way. Hook you up. You can always send a note there to get something else going on. We've got the all-in VIP package. If you buy that right now, you get everything. You get all of Scott's work, no matter what sport he's covering, baseball, basketball, football, whatever the heck it is. Scott Bondar, fantasyguru.com. Again, I don't know anything about college football. Everyone knows this. You were talking to me a little bit before the show. There's a smaller slate. I think you said 4 games tonight, right? Mm-hmm. If someone is newer to college football DFS, would you recommend they play the smaller slate tonight or go like the bigger slate tomorrow? Do you have a preference there for someone who's kind of dipping their toe in the water?
Yeah, I think these 4-game slates are very cash oriented. For building your bankroll, we're going to have a lot of chalk tonight. There isn't many plays that aren't going to be familiar with most of the folks that play across the country. Guys that play on Saturday, you have more of a spread with the 12 gamers. But tonight with a 4-game, there's a popular team that was just on TV last week, so I'm sure they're going to be 50 to 60% owned. So you have opportunities to kind of get familiar with some of these teams. If a nice Friday night slate, if you got nothing else going on, there's 4 games to watch. But I think tonight you're going to be playing cash. In GPPs, you're really going to want to dig deep in finding a guy, and especially on this slate like tonight, you want to leave salary on the table. I think people get so into that building, and I got to spend all my money. Tonight, there's some guys that are like 3,000 that, you might just need him in your lineup, but you're going to have maybe 5, 6, 7, even 2,000 left over if you're depending on whether or not you're playing certain players. So I think tonight's slate is a good opportunity for cash and to kind of not spend all that money that the sites are giving you.
Scott Bondar, fantasyguru.com. Scott's write-up for the games tonight is up. It went up, recently, within the last hour. I saw the tweet go out. So Fantasy Guru's site there. You can find it, obviously, fantasyguru.com. And there's a game tonight between Oklahoma State and BYU, Scott. And Ollie Gordon was supposed to be a big thing this year, maybe Heisman talk, that kind of thing. And it's been a little bit of a struggle for Mr. Gordon. Do we call him Mr. when they're that age? I call him Mr. We're a little bit of a struggle for Mr. Gordon. How are you feeling about him tonight? Is this the night where maybe things change in the positive direction for him?
Yeah, I think he's probably the junior because there's 2 or 3 of them. I think his dad is Ollie Gordon Sr.
Okay.
But in all seriousness, Gordon has pretty much been your Christian McCaffrey of college football. The expectations for this young kid, he had some offseason trouble. Immediately out the gate, you had his coach kind of like saying, we're going to ride him forever. And he scored 3 touchdowns right off the bat in the first game. And then after that, he kind of just faded and dealing with injuries, game script, a quarterback that doesn't like to run. So you kind of figured he would be leaned on more. There is hope tonight. His price tag is up there on both sites, 8,600 on DraftKings, and I think he's 96 for pretty high. One of the top guys tonight. So I can't imagine a lot of people are going to be paying for him unless they are going to spend all that money, like I mentioned. But tonight, he faces BYU. BYU is a young and up and coming team, 69 to 70th overall against the rush. So there is opportunity, and they are replacing that quarterback. So, I would imagine game script wise, Gundy might just lean on Gordon tonight. He was a little bit banged up in that West Virginia game last week. But at all expectations that he should be a full go tonight, even though it was a short week with them playing on Friday.
Scott, what if we move to Saturday's action? Big Ten's involved. There's a matchup with Nebraska and Indiana. I guess there's about a dozen games on the slate, you were telling me. So we got this game between Nebraska and Indiana. Huskers, Hoosiers. Who's piqued your interest in this game tomorrow?
Well, so in this game here, Indiana has just come out the gate on fire. You had the transfer coach and about 13 players from JMU. You got a young quarterback, Curtis Rowe, dual threat opportunities there. I know I talked to Mike before I jumped on here. You don't want to give out too many plays, but I'm looking at, to me, Rourke is one of the guys at 7,400 on DraftKings that I know that he'll be popular. We've been using him since he's been at OU. So he's one of the guys I think you can save because there are some high-priced quarterbacks on the slate that I think a lot of folks are going to be swimming towards those guys, and Roll can go a little bit under-owned and a pretty good matchup at home against Nebraska.
Yeah, for those of you wondering, how do we get college football? All I see is NFL. Go to fantasyguru.com, click the subscribe tab in the top right corner, then click football. And you can see it there, all the packages. The DFS content includes college and NFL. The betting includes college and NFL. If you get the elite seasonal package, you get the CFL and UFL. So fantasyguru.com, subscribe tab at the top. The bottom line is if you get the betting or the daily packages, you get college football for free. So we toss it in there. You get both college football and the NFL. You mentioned just, again, as an outsider to all this, Scott, that transfer stuff, like, does it make it more exciting and interesting, or does it make it more difficult? Because, like, I was talking to my nephew, and he knows more about it than I do because he's a young kid who's paying attention to this. It's like, you don't even know what school the guy's going to be playing for, and all the changes. Like, how does that play? I mean, now it's different because we're in mid-season, but how do you like it, or does it cause problems?
Well, it's interesting. To me, it's one of those. I used to always play the game of remember what college that person went to, and we'd be like, oh, Jared Goff went to Cal, and now It's like you have multiple opportunities to use. Jeff Sims, for example, started at Georgia Tech, went to Nebraska, and now he's actually starting this week for Arizona State. So as far as transferring, one thing that we kind of looked at early on this season is that these quarterbacks, there's a few. I mean, Cam Ward's one of them that's been successful, but a lot of these guys have transferred and they haven't seen immediate success. I think Will Howard for Ohio State's kind of one of those situations where like the team around him is really good, but he hasn't shown that big, upside that kind of like Justin Fields did when he came to Ohio State, where he immediately was a Heisman candidate. So it's definitely something to me. I do love the hot stove in baseball. I do love the NBA's free agency's fun, NFL and whatever. So I mean, kind of throughout the season, seeing this guy's going here, and we do a great job kind of breaking down the opportunities that these new players will get. If Mike and I kind of broke down each conference, and that was part of the package for college football, and kind of seeing which guys are impact. And I think we look back last year, and there were some guys we were pretty dead on. And again, there's someone like Keon Coleman. I mean, Mike was all over that when he went to Florida State. I mean, that guy was an absolute monster coming from Michigan State. So I think the opportunities are different. I think the wide receivers, especially if they're going with the coaches, like I mentioned, the JMU guy brought 13 of his players over, and a lot of those guys are going to be immediately successful because they're in that system. Guys that may transfer in, like Will Howard, for example, I'll go back to him. Chip Kelly's offense might not really correlate with him. I think someone maybe like Cam Ward would have been more successful in that offense. So it just, depending on overall, I think it's good for college football if you get an opportunity to get these kids to play more. In the long run, though, I do not like the NIL. I don't like – we're losing a lot of coaches. Saban, college basketball has lost a couple coaches that have been affected by the NIL and the transfer package because they really – their hands are tied to these kids wanting to play or, wanting more money. And it's an unfortunate situation. I mean, they were probably getting paid, 5-10 years ago, but we don't really, know. But so long answer, short answer, good.
Yeah. If someone, Scott, is playing, they're watching this and they've never played DFS, right? They're seasonal people with us over at fantasyguru.com, or they randomly stumbled onto the show. Would you recommend that someone, if they're going to start playing DFS, do you think it's better for them to go college football or NFL? Like, do you have a preference there? Is that a dumb question? What are your thoughts?
Well, I know you got Russell coming on next, and Russ is big on Dynasty, and Dynasty has taken over, slowly when it comes to football and building these guys up. Getting an opportunity to see someone like Jaylen Warren when he was at Oklahoma State, going back to them. Vidal, who was a monster in college. He obviously got an opportunity here with the Chargers. So I think it helps you in your seasonal as well as your DFS lineups to play college football. The unfortunate thing is legislation doesn't let every state in America play college football. So that's where you get hummed up and hanged up. I believe Ohio is now back into it this year because of, betting rights and stuff like that. So that's the thing that's really holding college football back as far as DFS. There's sites that actually offer seasonal DFS and best ball outside of the two main ones that we kind of use, which I believe that's growing each week. I play underdog each week. I do a draft best ball. There's 5 teams in it, and we just best, and it's a GPP. And I've did pretty good, with it. And it's pretty fun to kind of see the different type of ways to play college football when it comes to those things.
Scott Bondar, fantasyguru.com. And for those of you watching, you can see on the screen his Twitter X handle at Scott Bondar. Let's go back to the games tomorrow, Scott, and lots of high-profile quarterbacks, as you term them, on the slate. Who's going to be the most popular quarterback in your opinion? Is there a case for fading them if you're playing those GPPs? Talk us through that quarterback position.
Yeah, I think you got to fade Cam Ward. We talked about him briefly here as one of those transfer guys. I just think that price, and I mentioned there is some value at quarterback situation. One of the guys I'm definitely looking at, he's $1,000 cheaper than the big name Milroe and Ward is Cade Klubnik. Klubnik has pretty much broke out this year underneath, I believe it's Lincoln Riley's brother's offense. They finally got someone in Clemson. I know you're laughing, but
I can't help you there, Scott. Yeah.
No, he finally
Doug Williams. Oh no, right. Sorry. No.
Yeah, finally got somebody that I kind of can control and hinder his abilities. And, they're a 3-touchdown favorite. And the one thing about college football and the NFL, the difference there is 3 touchdowns, they're going to win by 3 touchdowns. Most likely obviously Alabama's a different situation, but they're going to get fantasy points. And I think that's the key point I wanted to kind of throw at. And Klubnik has been outstanding with 3 touchdowns almost the last 5 out of 6 weeks. I mean, he just kind of broke out. And I think against Virginia, it's going to be an opportunity to kind of use somebody. He will be pretty popular just because he is cheaper than the 2 bigger names on the slate.
Scott, what's something that Jeff Mans does? He talks about kind of playing both sides at times, meaning that, okay, we're going to play Klubnik. We're going to look at the spread too. So we're going to play DFS. We're going to play the betting side of things and kind of counterbalance it out. So if one fails, the other one carries us. Do you do that? Do you kind of fold the two together, DFS and betting? And is that something you'd recommend to folks?
Yeah, no, the one thing like I've been doing, I do the props at underdog, especially in the NFL. I think that works a lot better when it comes to kind of hitting those over-unders, touchdown props especially. I think college football, you do have more of a centric, you kind of have an idea who's going to get the ball in the goal line by now. They're not going to change out 2 or 3 guys throughout the season. So yeah, I definitely blend that way. As far as the betting side, I'm more on the NFL, but I use underdog as far as props, prize picks. I use those ones to do the stack. What do they call it? They call them, I don't know if they're parlays. I guess they would be to build lineups that way.
Scott, you've mentioned underdog. You've mentioned prize pick. Like in terms of FanDuel and DraftKings, there's no right or wrong, right? Okay, but almost everyone has a preference. Do you have a preference?
Well, I mean, we focus primarily on DraftKings, and I think that's just because it has the bigger pots and it has the bigger people playing. Russell, who's coming on next, obviously, he writes our FanDuel stuff, which covers, FanDuel does it different. They'll cover a slate from 12 until 7:30, which to me, it's kind of, your strategy has to be a little different. And Russ breaks that stuff down in his articles. So, I like to play, if I do play FanDuel, I play the early only, which is the 12 o'clock games. In college football, there's enough games to go around that they're able to stack slates throughout the day. But I think that one's primarily the best way to play it. But as far as overall, DraftKings main slate, 12 to 14 games, sometimes there's 10. But those are the ways I kind of utilize that. And it correlates so well, with the exception of the Superflex with NFL as far as the scoring. So you kind of have an idea what you're getting with the bonuses, and then obviously the 6-point touchdowns and PPR.
Scott Bondar, fantasyguru.com. As I noted, his article's up for a lot of the stuff we're talking about here right now over at FG. Subscribe tab in the top right corner. Click on it. Get those packages. Get college football. Get the NFL. Have a lot of fun there. A couple of games this week, UCLA and Rutgers, and South Carolina and Oklahoma. where the over-under is low, like way lower than everyone else. 10 points, I think you were telling me before the show. How do you handle games like that? Vegas isn't always right. We can talk about this all the time, but when it seems like everyone in college football is scoring 40 points, 50, it's like there's always big efforts. If the over-under is 41, do you avoid that? Like, how do you handle those games?
Yeah, so those games, it's interesting. I mean, South Carolina and Oklahoma have, other than last week, have great defenses. I know they both kind of ran into some juggernauts with Alabama and Texas, but you're going to have a low-scoring game. I think what you look in there and what Mike and Chris and I kind of look for in those games are those value players. Maybe the guy that's been getting a lot of targets, but he's underpriced because the algorithm assumes that this game won't go over 42 points. That doesn't mean he's not going to catch 10 for 100 and fall in the end zone, of one of those, 4 touchdowns that are expected to be scored. So I think you look at those games. The upside for quarterbacks in those games is a little bit tougher. A lot of those teams are running heavy teams because of that low scoring game. Obviously, run the clock out. A team like South Carolina, Rocket Sanders, they're going to run a lot. UCLA, running back coach who used to be a running back in the NFL. So they have a lot of slower games, and that's why the spread is so low. But in those games, you look at maybe the wide receiver 1, the primary running back, Rutgers running back. I'm not going to pronounce his name. Mike and Chris will give me a hard time, but he's one of the featured backs in college football. So he's going to get 20 to 30 carries, if touches at least, in the game. So those are the type of guys I'd be looking at in those matchups.
Scott Bondar, fantasyguru.com. Again, his Twitter X handle @Scott Bondar. What's the next 36 hours look like for you, Scott? Like, what's the plan? Obviously, article again went up this morning. What's the plan through the rest of the weekend here for college football?
Oh, for college. I thought you meant for me.
I know you're going to have fun, I'm sure. But
I got to do baseball. I got to do NFL. But no. So, we got tonight, we got the live stream. If you're a subscriber, you definitely have access to our triple option. Tonight, Russell's going to fill it in for me. I have a sick kid at home that I'm taking care of. And Chris and Mike will be on there. If you haven't had an opportunity to watch these guys go, I mean, it's so fun. It's not just the fact that we're all buddies, but we also are relaxed. It's very, very enjoyable, hour long. We break down every game. And we give some Core 4 preview. We kind of use it time to read the article for you to get the Core 4. And then, the night slate's done by Chris. Russell's got his FanDuel slate that he's covering. He's a busy man too. And Mike's covering the main slate, which will be usually posted right after, I believe, Jeff's cash game article around the same time. But I'll be watching baseball. I got a DFS article for defense. But no, it's a good time of year. I mean, especially, I'm going to tell you one, we haven't really plugged in, but the NHL content we have, freaking amazing. Like, I don't even know anything about that. I trust George, man, and Ryan. Those two guys, they break down this stuff like gold. I'm like, click. That's it. And I know Sandro, one of our guys, he took down a GPP the other day. I mean,
yeah.
Phenomenal work at the NHL people. So, I mean, if you don't have an opportunity to get that, I think it's part of the all-in package. And I know you mentioned it, message whoever needs you to get that package, because that's phenomenal work that those two guys are running.
Yeah, you can always go to the site, subscribe in the top right corner, get the all-in to get everything, all the sports that Scott loves and covers, the whole team. There you go. He's got his Capitals t-shirt on. Is it a shirtsy or is it just a Caps t-shirt?
No, it's just a regular shirt.
Okay.
I got. Yeah.
Always send a note to support at fantasyguru.com as well. Hope your son feels better, Scott. Thanks for the visit today. Maybe we'll get you on before the season's over again. That'd be nice to do here on Fantasy Sports Daily. Hope you have a nice weekend. And final question. Yankees-Dodgers World Series, that's what's going to happen?
I got the Guardians. I bet on them in August. That's from Ohio, hometown team, so I got to root for them. I am a Nationals fan, but I'll root for Cleveland because, a lot of roots there that are rooting for them. But I know the MLB wants Ohtani and Judge. I mean, I've seen it. I just don't. I know. It's a shame.
He's Scott Bondar. Again, on Twitter, X @Scott Bondar, and he's part of the team at fantasyguru.com. Thanks for your time today, Scott. Really appreciate it. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, Ray. Thanks again for inviting me in.
You got it. Scott Bondar of fantasyguru.com. Thank you, Scott. All right. So we just talked to one of the folks that covers fantasy football on the college side of things. We're not going to talk to another guy who covers things for college football, but we're not going to talk to him about college football because we just talked college football. We're going to talk to him about the NFL. And that's the guy that we talk to every Friday at about this time, 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. His name is Russell Clay. And because he lent his home out today to Scott Bondar, you saw Scott with the piano behind him everything like that. Apparently, Russell's in a different location because Scott's living in his house now. Russell, how you doing today, bud?
I'm great. Yeah, I rented it out, decided to monetize my my place there, and
Nice.
glad to see he's having a good time. The cleaning fees are only going to be, $700. So.
Yeah, I don't know Scott that well, but there might be some cleaning fees after Scott. I don't know. He might have some fun in there. I'm just guessing.
I've seen some horror stories of people charging like double their rent for the cleaning fees.
Right.
So I'm like, yeah.
Read that small print. Thanks for joining us today. We know you were traveling last week. Everything go well for the wedding?
Nice and smooth. My buddy did get married successfully.
Okay,
shout out to him. They did get it done, and I got to reconnect with some fam that I haven't seen in a while. So it was really good.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm glad you had a good time there. I'm glad you're back with us today. I'm sure the listeners and viewers are as well. Let's dive into what happened on Thursday Night Football just a little bit before we move on. I want to ask you about the backfields. We talked, I think, last week about Kendre Miller. That offense is in trouble now. They have all kinds of injuries on the line with the skill players. We know that. Alvin Kamara's beat up, and Kendre Miller finally played and had some bursts there. You see anything last night that leads you to be excited about him in the short term in 2024 in the fantasy world?
So this is the time of year where teams start to decide if their season is over or not. And the Saints have been notoriously stubborn with giving up, right? Whether it's the offseason signing free agents, they did this Derek Carr thing to keep themselves from the rebuild. They're keeping all their older players like Alvin Kamara. Is this the year? It was over, Ray. I mean, that game was over.
Yeah.
They are much worse than the Broncos, and the Broncos are maybe they can sneak into the playoffs, but they are not a great team. And that was two teams on very different levels last night. So I am super curious how this is going to go for Kendre Miller, because what is the point of doing the Alvin Kamara thing right now other than for us for fantasy, right? There really is no point to keeping Alvin Kamara as their full-time guy. I don't know if they trade him. He's pissed at the half. I mean, so this is the time of year where a lot of these running back depth charts are going to shift, and Kendre's clear. Like, if the Saints are smart, they're going to start getting a look at their younger guys here. But who knows? The Saints, again, they had Drew Brees for a decade and they never had to even think about this. Right. So we'll see.
Yeah, and they always seemingly are $500 million over the salary cap every year and somehow figure it out. I don't know. Russell, what about on the other side of things? Audric Estime, was out there. His second game in a row, he's been active. He had a fumble, but looked good other than the fumble, I guess. Jaleel McLaughlin has kind of receded to the point where he's kind of like a satellite back. And so it seems very likely, and I think that's what most of us at FG think, that Estime is the horse behind Jamal Williams. If he goes down, obviously Williams had a big game last night, 88 yards and a couple of touchdowns. Estime, just a stash? You think he can eat into the workload with Williams? You liking what you've seen so far from him on limited touches?
He's a stash. The real storyline here is Javonte Williams looks all right again. Javonte Williams, just 24 years old, came into the league really young, had that major injury, but he actually had a pretty good rookie year. Again, fantasy perception is based on how many touchdowns they can score with the yards. If a guy scores 10 touchdowns with 500 yards, he's going to get the hype. If he has 1,000 yards and 2 touchdowns, people aren't going to be very happy with that. So Javonte had one of those rookie years and, comes back from the injury and he's terrible because, of course, why wouldn't you be? And now he's starting to look like old Javonte again. So this isn't an Alvin Kamara situation. The Broncos are going to be contending for a playoff spot. They have a young quarterback they want to build with. So I'm generally optimistic about Javonte for the first time in, probably 3 years. So definitely a new world out there, Ray.
Russell Clay of fantasyguru.com. Russell's our dynasty guy. You heard Scott Bondar mention it. He is our dynasty guy over at fantasyguru.com. A couple of young running backs. Let's talk about a young quarterback who's made one NFL start, who pluses and minuses. He showed the athleticism. He showed the arm. The offense looked better. There were touchdowns. There were turnovers. The knee issue that Drake Maye is dealing with apparently is minor, so he'll play through that, so that's good news. We've had a lot of fun talking Drake Maye this week. A lot of people want to get in. Should they get in? Did you like what you saw last week? And is there a legit chance that Drake Maye is anything other than quarterback 20 the rest of the way?
Oh, man, this is starting to sound like Bitcoin and Ethereum right now. Tyler Beaker, during the offseason, we had a good laugh because the way Drake Maye looks is a traditional pocket passer who doesn't have any movement in the pocket, but he's actually a runner at North Carolina. So we saw that last week, and Tyler did bet his over, which I accompanied him with. And I think that's going to continue to be a thing. All these new quarterbacks, man, like even the pocket passers can run now. So that is something to really think about with Maye. And I think he does have a little more upside than currently perceived. That the weapons aren't great. They're going to really struggle against top defenses. But overall, I like it. I think as long as he's out there and starting, you're going to get a really solid floor for fantasy, which you cannot say. I mean, we saw it from Spencer Rattler last night. That's not a guarantee at all. So I think the floor is nice there, even though it is the Patriots.
Russell, let's go back to the running back position. And, we've had the whole CMC thing since the preseason with the Niners. And then Jordan Mason shows up and he's running back 4, whatever the hell he is. He's ripping off runs. Then he hurts his shoulder. Here comes Issac Guerrendo ripping off a 70-yard run late, gets 99 rushing yards. No one's quite certain what's going to happen this week. We know McCaffrey's not playing this week. We heard a report from Ian Rappaport saying that the shoulder issue with Jordan Mason leaves his status up in the air. Issac Guerrendo. Who is Issac Guerrendo for the uninitiated? And if Jordan Mason is out, 100% firing up Guerrendo. And if Mason plays, is Guerrendo a flex option?
Issac Guerrendo is a former bench warmer on Wisconsin who could not get snaps. He was behind Braylon Allen, and he was also behind another guy, Ches Malusi, who? Exactly. That guy is not good. So whatever went on at Wisconsin, I don't know. He did go to Louisville in his final season and had a good year. Then he went to the combine, and all of us, I think, collectively said, wait, this guy ran a 4.3 at 220 pounds. I guess, okay. And then the San Francisco 49ers drafted him in the 4th round, and we were all like, okay, not a guy I would have highlighted as, a savvy runner or overly talented guy, but he has that raw speed. And my stance, Ray, in 2024 is, Kyle Shanahan drafted him. I'm in. So that's where I'm at. If Mason doesn't play, we saw it last week. We saw that speed. Now, I do have a bone to pick with Issac Guerrendo of the sliding down and not scoring the touchdown, but he has immense speed, and the San Francisco 49ers line is going to open up a lot of holes for him. So yeah, whoever's there, again, the amount of RB2, RB3, RB4 decisions on teams right now that we're having to make is pretty insane.
Yep.
Someone was joking yesterday about team running back, team wide receiver, and I'm a hardcore fantasy football guy, but when you come off looking off at some of these, you're like, you know what? I get it. I get why you'd want that. So Issac Guerrendo to the moon.
If Mason plays, is Guerrendo a flex? Would you take that risk? I mean, I know the answer depends on your team, but is that in consideration or is that a bad idea?
No, if Mason plays, I think they've shown he's a featured guy in their offense. So even if they do split, it'll probably be like a 70-30, 80-20. So yeah, no.
Russell Clay at fantasyguru.com. He joins us every Friday at about 12:30 Eastern Standard Time here on Fantasy Sports Daily. Let's talk about the Cardinals here. You got Michael Wilson's got an ankle issue he's dealing with. Marvin Harrison's got the head injury he's dealing with. It seems like both are going to play. But talk us through this passing attack with the Cardinals. It started out pretty exciting for some folks, and now people want to bench Kyler Murray.
Well, this is another one of those teams that the Cardinals, they're not like the Saints at all. They're ready to pack it in as soon as they lose one game, right? They're just ready to end the season right away. So one guy I would highlight is James Conner on that offense. I know we're kind of going in a different direction here, but they drafted Trey Benson, and coming into the year, I mean, James Conner's the only old guy on that offense left. Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison, Kyler, you mentioned it, and they have Trey Benson. So now that the season is starting to look lost, I do wonder, I know Conner was also getting his ankles taped and didn't return last week. So keep an eye on Trey Benson, probably not on waiver wires anymore. But that's something, the whole offense is something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I'll tell you, without Harrison and Wilson, that offense there, we always try to look for the replacements.
Right.
I don't know that there is one.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's just bad. Right. I think it's just goes from, oh, we're competent to no, there's no way this is happening other than Kyler running.
Everyone said Harrison to the moon, right? Dynasty and everything. Number one pick in almost every draft. And that nothing has happened to change that point of view. But he was drafted, top 15 in seasonal, like really high. And there's been moments, but if you did that, if you took Harrison, first pick of the second round or whatever, should you be nervous the rest of the way?
Yeah. And I only know this through experience of watching the Calvin Johnsons and the Julios, and, AJ Green had a breakout year one, but a lot of these guys that go top 5 are going to really bad spots. So yeah, I don't think the Cardinals were the worst spot for Harrison, but we're kind of seeing, okay, some weeks teams are just bracketing him and it's not happening. So that's not going to happen on, the Chiefs for Rashee Rice or, other things like that. So yeah, I'm worried for those that drafted him round 1. That's not fun in a redraft. I can tell you that, but dynasty, like you said, we're fine. We got a year or two before we really need those big seasons, but redraft, it's hurting.
I wrote a Coffin Corner piece. It's up every Friday. It goes up over at fantasyguru.com. And I talked about Kyler Murray in that article. And Fred C's got a comment here. And he wanted to know, do I start Kyler Murray or Geno Smith? And again, it was a long time ago. It was draft day, right? But on draft day, everyone in the universe is Kyler Murray. Is it still Kyler Murray here in week 7?
Yes, but Geno Smith has proven to be a problem if you picked him up, because he is good enough to start over these guys. And it's an every week question. And we see so many of them in the Fantasy Guru Discord that is a good question because they're ranked right next to each other. Geno's in a fantastic offense with great weapons and has so much more support than Kyler. I would just say the rushing is the difference there almost every week for me with Kyler. We saw him have a huge rush a few weeks ago, and I would keep going with Kyler, but it is a good question.
I have a good question, which I continue to be shocked by the fact that I seemingly am the only person that answers yes to this following question. Is Evan Engram good? Yes. Like, I am stunned by the amount of people that still say Evan Ingram's on the waiver wire, that have Evan Engram and another tight end, they're going to drop Evan Engram. He's caught 115 passes last year and he had 10 catches last week. Like, what has happened to the brain of fantasy folks that they don't understand that if you've got Evan Engram, you're good. You're set at tight end. You don't need to get another tight end. You don't need to be worried about the tight end spot. And for heaven's sake, don't drop Evan Engram. What is going on, Russell?
You know who's really happy Evan Engram is back is Trevor Lawrence. They connected 10 of 10.
Yeah.
They connected. And shout out to Brenton Strange, a guy generally I was high on as a tight end who can be something in the future. The difference between Brenton Strange and Evan Engram, like you're describing, is huge. I mean, they need him. And it was proven through that missed time. They are not nearly the same offense without him. Right. So he is locked into a role. I don't know what's going on with Christian Kirk this year, but he seems to be the odd man out if there is one, and it's Engram and Brian Thomas. So it's a hell of a year for the Jags. But one thing we do know, Evan Engram is locked into that role. So I agree. High-end tight end 1 for this year, and 10 of 10. That probably hasn't happened many times.
No, certainly. And he fumbled, but who cares?
Yeah, that was ugly. But
yeah, we'll skip over that.
Yeah.
Jim C has a question about guys we've been talking about. You just mentioned. If Mason doesn't go, if Jordan Mason is out, you said Guerendo's in. But is it Guerendo in over Brian Thomas, who you just mentioned? Because he does have Evan Engram. And I would lean Guerendo over Thomas if Mason was out, just as a general. But when I see Engram there too, I don't trust Trevor Lawrence enough to go with 2 pass catchers from that team over Guerendo.
I always say if the offense is great, I'm down to have as many players on it as possible. As you just said, this Jaguars team is barely getting to 17 points a week, and it's even worse to watch. So I'd probably make a choice there. No Mason, probably Guerendo. Again, I would just look at it. San Francisco starting running back, which is Issac Guerrendo this week. So that makes it easier for me to put him in over Brian Thomas. But Thomas is awesome. Yeah.
Russell Clay of fantasyguru.com joining us here. I'm Ray Flowers. Khalil Shakir, Tommy Callahan was our guy. And he performed well. And he got hurt. So a little disappointment there. Then Amari Cooper comes into town. Concerns. Everyone who was in and loved Shakir 3 weeks ago now wants to drop him. Like, I don't know about you. I've gotten 75 questions this week about dropping Khalil Shakir. And almost every time the question seems to be Shakir or Juju Smith-Schuster. So I'll put it to you. If you had to choose one of the two, is it Shakir or Juju? And secondarily, shouldn't it just be both? Shouldn't we actually be dropping somebody else in most instances?
So hear me out, guys. Okay. Khalil Shakir was never really a one. Nobody ever really thought of him as a one alpha guy. He was always someone who gets open in zone and could have a really big year with Josh Allen. Adding Amari Cooper, I wouldn't say hurts what he had going on. They were really struggling on deeper targets, really struggling, did not have a clear top guy. They just didn't have the digs this year. So I don't know that this affects Shakir as much as you would think. They needed another guy in there. Kincaid had not developed like they wanted. And you mentioned Shakir got hurt. He was playing amazing. I know he wasn't having huge fantasy days, but just watching the games, they're not going to push him aside now that Cooper's there. He's playing too well. So this is also a Josh Allen thing, guys. He had a 9 for 30 passing attempt game a few weeks ago. He was struggling. So I don't know. I don't worry about that. In terms of Juju, God, I'll tell you what, guys, forward your Chiefs questions to Jeff Mans, because he's nailed this offense the entire season. And I was like, Juju, and then he comes in and has that great game, and Kareem Hunt, and the system there works, and Juju is a great slot weapon for them. But I would go Shakir over Juju right now, especially Juju has an injury. So I would keep an eye on that. But yeah, I mean, these guys are in the same range. I get why this is a question, but I might be looking to drop somebody else.
What about Albert M, who has a question here? He's got to keep
Albert.
Shakir or Kirk, two guys we were just talking about. Another one. Again, the answer to this is both. Okay. But a lot of people are in shallow leagues. A lot of people built good rosters. If you had to make the decision between Kirk and Shakir, who you hold on to?
I would still go Kirk. The thing is, he's completely lost our trust at this point. And some of these games, even in the games that he has produced, they were kind of miracle covers at the end, they were backdoor covers. He had one catch for 3 yards, and then he had two 30-yard plays at the very end of a game a few weeks ago. It's been so weird. I don't know what's going on with him and Lawrence and Doug Peterson, but he has not been as big of a factor as he was in previous years. So if I'm picking, I might pick Shakir here, but I don't want to drop Kirk yet. But it's close.
Zadi asked the question. We were just talking about the Jaguars. Let's continue it going. Evan Engram or David Njoku? Who should start this week? We gave a lot of praise to Engram. The Browns offense seemingly is David Njoku at this point, but it's the Browns offense. What do you do?
Zadi, I'll give an easy answer. Amari Cooper got traded, and he drove to Buffalo. That's how much he wanted to get away from Deshaun Watson. So I would just go with Engram. I get the Njoku thing. He's awesome. Would like him a lot more with Joe Flacco back there. I kind of wish that just stayed, and then we could have, Amari Cooper would still be on the Browns, and we'd all be happy right now. But I would just go with Engram. Last week was crazy, and again, that's just what we saw last year too. So
Jim C says, is that a Rudy's barbecue cup? Why, yes, it is a Rudy's barbecue cup. Look at that. My significant other got it for me. I didn't actually get to go to Rudy's. So I'm kind of faking it, but she picked it up for me on one of her trips. So it is a Rudy's cup. Good eye there, Jim.
Nice.
You ever been to Rudy's?
No.
Are you a barbecue guy, Russell?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if they have Rudy's where you're at. Probably don't. Greg M says this. Can I get an FU to Cortland Sutton? Is he getting traded or something? Like, rage drop Cortland Sutton is happening all over the place right now. We know it. 0 targets? Like, I know the game was out of reach, and they put the game out of reach, and he played every snap, ran every route, 0 targets. Like, what the hell is going on with Cortland Sutton right now?
I had to get some ice and rub it on my face at halftime because Marvin Mims had 2 catches, boys. Holy shit.
What's going on there with
Troy
that team?
Franklin being featured?
Yeah.
I have no idea. Sean Payton, he's winning with this team, so I'm not gonna this is not a good offense, and I would drop everyone other than Javonte on this offense. I'm done. I've kind of been done. And I went on a mini rant yesterday about this. I unfortunately think this is the future of the NFL. We've seen this in college football forever. They are featuring like 6 guys on this passing game. Right. I think 9 guys got a target for them yesterday. Lucas Kroll.
4.
I mean, that sounds like a villain in, some cartoon.
There was a movie named Kroll, I think.
Yeah.
Dead, right?
That's an 80s horror.
Yeah.
And I just don't. They're trying to develop Bo Nix in ways that are not helpful for fantasy. There's no clear weapon to use. So I would just let go of Sutton at this point. He's going to have some big games, but they are trying to bring in their young guys. They're trying to win games with defense and the running game. And they have a bunch of, you mentioned McLaughlin not hurting the rushers anymore, but is taking targets. So yeah, I just watch this offense and say, some offenses you can start multiple guys. Some offenses it's maybe Javonte, and that's it. So
Kroll is a 1983 British science fiction adventure film that follows Prince Cowlin and a fellowship of companions who set out to rescue his bride. They had that little thing you threw like a star with a
yeah.
Anyway, John G asked a question. Can you start Gibbs and Montgomery weekly? He's got them both on one team. Jeff Mans has said, yeah, you can do that. What do you think, Russell?
Absolutely. Again, Gibbs is probably not giving you what you wanted to start the year, but let's look at this. So we have 91 points from David Montgomery, 18 points a game, 16 points per game for Jahmyr Gibbs. That is 34 points a game. So 17 a game. If you just had two running backs on different teams and you just plopped them in there every week and you were getting 17 points per game, you're happy. Like, that's a win for you. So we don't know who is going to get the big game each week, but if you can put both of them in, you have the full Lions running game. They don't put anybody else in there. This is arguably the best offense in the league. I would just throw them in there every week. And Montgomery, that is their goal. That's their plan. Nobody can stop that rushing touchdown play. So just go with Montgomery and Gibbs and take your 34, 35 points a week.
By the way, Amon-Ra St. Brown is in my Coffin Corner piece over at fantasyguru.com that went up this morning. And I pointed out he's doing just fine. He's basically like he was 2 years ago. He's not at the level he was last year. Does that change with Amon-Ra St. Brown? Because he was a first-round pick, and while he's been fine, those consistent 8 for 90 games that we're used to seeing from over and over again, we're not seeing that in that offense. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Jared Goff's going 18 for 20 every week. They don't have the volume. Is St. Brown still a wide receiver one with confidence, or is he a high-end wide receiver two?
He's still a wide receiver one. The funniest part is, you mentioned it, he's been surviving fantasy-wise off touchdowns. Three touchdowns in his last 3 games, but that volume is not even close to the same. The biggest factor here is Jameson Williams, who's really developed. And when you don't have those long drives and Jameson Williams is picking up a 50-yard catch, that just takes away 2 to 3 targets that St. Brown would have gotten on 3rd down or a 2nd down and long. So you just have to factor that in. This is a different offense this year. They're better, but they're better because Jameson Williams can score 50-yard touchdowns. Now, Khalif Raymond could do that once every 6 games last year, but this is happening for J-Mo. He's having 30, 40, 50-yard catches every other game right now. So that's the big factor there, and that's what's killing them, or killing St. Brown at least.
Final question for you, Russell, before we let you go. We answered the question of Shakir versus Kirk. Albert wants to get another guy in the mix. We talked about Njoku. We talked about the Browns. Jerry Jeudy, for now, is the wide receiver one there. There are rumors that he might be traded, and who the hell knows if that happens. 3 very similar guys. Again, the answer is probably just yes. But if you had to choose 2 of 3 with Kirk, Shakir, and Jeudy, who's the number 3 that's heading out?
What? I can't hear you. Albert, I can't see the question. It's blurred out.
The tech is not working.
No. Okay. This is just a mishmash of confusion and pain. I would not put Jerry Jeudy in there. He has been playing well. I can't do the Deshaun Watson thing other than the Njoku right now. So I would not put Jeudy in that range yet, but he is playing well and he's been healthy. So that is a good thing. The curious guy is Cedric Tillman for me, who I really liked out of Tennessee. Keep an eye on him. This is going to be his first real opportunity. So excited to see that.
Russell Clay at fantasyguru.com. Give us the rundown the next couple of days. Russell, you're busy. You're doing college, you're doing NFL. What do you got?
Yeah, so just finished up with Ray here. We're going to be doing the betting show in a few minutes after this. 5-0 against the spread last week. Shout out to the Fantasy Guru staff. That's awesome. Do have a college football article coming out later today, and we'll be on the live stream tonight with Beard and Chris Rose. Those guys are beasts at college football, so definitely come check us out there. And hanging out in the chat, Talking Dynasty in the Fantasy Guru Dynasty Discord. And Sunday morning, that is the time where Albert, you can come in with that question, and I will put a thinking gif, yeah, and say, I don't know. Or I'll do the mind blown and say, that's a good question, Albert. I don't know. But Sunday mornings, final hour and a half before kickoff, we will be answering your start sit questions. So lots of good stuff going on. And God, I think I saw 3 articles posted this morning, racing and DFS for NFL and all that stuff. Yeah. So tons of stuff floating around there.
Yeah, click the subscribe tab in the top right corner at fantasyguru.com. Get the all-in VIP platinum package. Choose your poison, this sport, that sport, DFS, seasonal, wagering. We've got it all over at fg.com or fantasyguru.com. Send a note to support at fantasyguru.com if you got a question. And look for Russell's work over there. You can find his work on Twitter X at Russell J. Clay. You can find him here on Fantasy Sports Daily every Friday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Russell, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you in 7 days. And thank you so much for your visit today.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray.
You got it. He's Russell. I'm Ray. Good luck this weekend in Week 7 in the NFL. Check us out over at fantasyguru.com. Sign up for everything. That subscribe tab in the top right corner. Do it now. For Russell, I am Ray. This has been Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by fantasyguru.com.